Open your Bibles to the book of Revelation, chapter 13. I'm still in verse 12. We'll start with verse 11. And I beheld another beast coming out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. Just a very quick review. One of those horns was the Crusades, the Crusaders, during the Holy Roman Empire, under the direction of Pope Urban II. And the second horn of the 2 horns like a lamb beast was the British Empire. And he spake as a dragon. It seemed Christian-like because it had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spake as a dragon. It was carrying out the desires, the wishes of Satan himself, without even recognizing who really is in control. And he exercises all the power of the first beast, he being the 2-horned beast, exercised all the power of the first beast before him. Or had you write this before? If you haven't yet, do it now. Literally it means in his presence. That means the 2 horns like a lamb is going to be in the presence of the first beast. In this case, the area, the territory, the geographical territory, which we already covered, which includes Iran, Iraq, Syria. Lebanon, Jordan, northern Saudi Arabia, but now since it's all controlled, for most of the peninsula at least, of that geographical area, all of Saudi Arabia, Turkey. Turkey's been in the news as of late because of the flotilla that didn't get through and lives were lost. Turkey's deciding to break relations with Israel. I wouldn't even be surprised to see Greece. Greece is falling apart financially. It was loaned money recently. But when they can't pay that loan, and the European Union decide not to loan them any more money, who do you think they're going to turn to, folks? Probably, and I wouldn't doubt it, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I wouldn't doubt it, in the near future you see them turning to the East, or in this case the Middle East, to revive the Islamic Empire. They have the money. Their power is growing. And there's 2 horns like a lamb, as I showed you last Sunday evening. If you missed it, you need to watch the archive message or rerun message when it plays. And cause of the earth and them which dwell therein to worship, or in this case to bow down, to fawn, to kiss, to give allegiance to the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And that's where I left off, and I'm going to probably be on this probably for a few more times, trying to figure a way how to go through it quicker so we can move on to the 13th verse. But I don't want to speed along too quickly, because I want you to understand completely how this wound was healed. In a general sense, I covered it was healed because of financial power that was given to it, because it was rich in a certain commodity, and that commodity was oil. And how the British Empire controlled most of the first beast geographical territory at the time. They don't now, but at the time, to bring this beast back to life by drilling for oil. Oil made this beast come back to life. Oil made this beast able to put itself in a position when even threats by the United States or any other United Nations or any other country, you saw that today when they voted for sanctions against Iran because of its nuclear program. You see that in the news. You pick up a newspaper or listen to the news. And they just mock it, saying, so what? I'll just give you a paraphrase view of it. So what? We're not going to listen to you. The West doesn't matter. Other countries doesn't matter. They have an agenda. They know what they want to accomplish. The rest of the world don't have a clue why they are like that, why Syria is like that. In Iraq, I guarantee you it's going to be like that too, as we begin to pull out our troops. Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, areas controlled by terrorist groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, Turkey, and their arrogancy. You see that now. Iran, I just read it yesterday in a newspaper, where Iran is threatening to send its own ship to the aid of Gaza to supply the supplies and necessary things that they need through its own flotilla. And thinking about putting a Revolutionary Guard on that boat in case they say Israel attacks it. They're provoking, folks. They want war. The West is naive. The rest of the world is naive, thinking that what's happening around Israel with the Palestinian states in Lebanon, Syria, all the way to Pakistan, don't be fooled, is because of certain territorial rights. Who controls what? Sorry, it's not. It's about Islam and its influence and its grab for religious power. I want to read you something. It's going to take me a while, so I want to start now. This is about 10 years old, but still applies today. Because of the humanistic and mainly secular mindset of the West, also of the major part of Israel's population, the following will be difficult to accept and digest. And that is, the chief reason for the Middle East conflict is not so much a secular political one, but a religious Islamic one. Because the West, nor Israel, generally speaking, does not want to be seen as being against another man's religious beliefs, there is a widespread reluctance to face up to this problem. It is not done in our so-called tolerant society to criticize the tenets of a whole religion which comprises 1 billion adherents. Actually, it's a lot more than 1 billion of the population of Islamic Muslim people. When you look at the true and accurate sources, it comes out to 1.82 billion people, and that was as of 2009. I wouldn't be surprised it's over 2 billion people. 2 billion Islamic Muslim believers. And there is no such thing as a moderate Muslim Islamic religious believer. Their demeanor might dictate that, but the agenda, what they're taught, what they are expecting, there's nothing moderate about it. Which comprises of 1 billion. Yet it is impossible to resolve, it's impossible to really solve the present Middle East conflict without facing up to this overall problem. This is what this essay is trying to do. It will be in some ways difficult, but it is always highly necessary, because Islam believes that it is the final revelation of Allah, superseding all previous ones. In other words, there's only one religion, and they're it. It has a high built-in characteristic of intolerance. That's why there's no moderates. From the main religious, it is indeed the youngest, and thus the latest one, and therefore it can easily claim without too much fear of contradiction that it is the final and more superior revelation of God. This being so, Islam has conveniently divided the whole world into two spheres, Dar el-Harb and Dar el-Islam. Dar el-Islam being the house or region of peace, that means all lands and peoples already conquered by Islamic forces. That is Dar el-Islam. Dar el-Arb, or Arb, being those lands and people in the world that still need to be conquered by Islam, which is therefore the whole remaining world. Now this is written 10 years ago, but it's still true, the principle today. They've got two camps, the Dar el-Harb and the Dar el-Islam. Dar el-Islam being the house or region of peace, that means all lands and peoples already conquered by Islamic forces, is the area predominantly, even though there's very small pockets, and when I say small, they're small, of Christian believers are Islamic believers. They are what I've been reading to you in Revelation chapter 13:12. They're the beast, the Islamic empirical beast that was wounded with a deadly wound, which we already covered in this series, which happened in 732 in the Battle of Tours, when Charles the Hammer Martel hammered, literally, the Islamic forces back, and they retreated in their campaign to take over Europe with their ultimate goal of getting to the British Isles. That's documented. That's fact. That's history. I'm not making that up. And that's secular history, which lines up with biblical history. This is Dar el-Islam. Here in this document I'm reading to you, but in the Bible, they're the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. They're the Dar el-Islam, that empirical power of Islam that's revived once again because one of the horns decided to bring it back to life because its desire and campaign to sustain its need for oil. I have a lot more to say about that. Not tonight, but in the near future. And Dar el-Harb, or Arb, I never get those pronunciations right, being those lands and people in the world that still need to be conquered by Islam. Whoever isn't Islam still needs to be conquered. And this article says the remaining world that's not Islam. Let me continue reading. In the Himi-Bat-Yi, it is written, and don't worry about all these different names. Just listen to the information I'm giving you tonight. All this will tie in together in the future. The Jihad is a global conception that divides the peoples of the world into two camps. That of Dar el-Arb, the territory of war, which covers those regions controlled by the infidels, and Dar el-Islam, the territory of Islam, the Muslim homeland where Islamic law reigns. Once again, the deadly wound that was healed, which is none other than what the book of Revelation chapter 13 declares, the first beast. The first beast in that chapter. That's like a lion, a leopard, bear, and lion. A leopard, bear, and lion. and looking back into history, as we did in earlier teachings, what geographical areas that covered: Persia, Babylonian, and the Grecian Empire, and all the areas, which is most of the Middle East, which Alexander the Great conquered. The jihad is the normal and permanent state of war. Now this is in the Himibayi. The jihad is the normal and permanent state of war between the Muslims and the Dar el-Arb. Who are the Dar el-Arb? Write it down. D-A-R-A-L-H-A-R-B. And Dar el-Islam is D-A-R-A-L-I-S-A-L-A-M. The jihad is a normal and permanent state of war between the Muslims and the Dar el-Arb, a war that can only end with final domination over unbelievers and the absolute supremacy of Islam throughout the world. And you think they're going to rest until they accomplish that? If you do, you're naive. You need to educate yourself and bring yourself up to speed what Islam is all about. It's trying to disguise itself now in some peaceful religion. It's never been peaceful. It started with war. And it's going to end, according to the book of Revelation, with the final war of wars. Once the forces of Islam conquer a land or territory, it is to remain under Islamic dominion forever. What if they lost it? Their quest is to regain it, because they don't consider it the infidels' land. It still considers it Islamic land. Once the forces of Islam conquer a land or territory, it is to remain under Islamic dominion forever. And it is a mortal affront to the supremacy of Islam when such territories would ever be lost to the dominion of Islam and revert to previous infidel ownership, as was the case in Palestine. It was a Muslim-controlled territory under Muslim Arabs and Muslim Turks, and reverted by the degree of the UN resolution back to its previous owners, the Jews. This is how the Covenant of Islamic Resistance Movement spells it out in several of its passages. Now, the Covenant Islamic Resistance Movement was written back in August 1988. What I'm going to read to you is, I believe, coming from Article 3. And this is what it says. The Islamic Resistance Movement believes that the land of Palestine is an Islamic WAQF. W-A-Q-F. What does that mean? It means something that's detained for religious or charitable. That's the cover-up, by the way. The charitable. That's the PR movement of a WAQF. So it's for religious or charitable purposes. Whatever it is, it could be buildings, it could be lands. It comes into detention, in other words. It's detained by Islamic powers. And once that WAQF is created, there's no such thing as losing that control. They might physically lose it, but it's dedicated to the very end of time for the purposes why that WAQF was created in the first place. With that understanding, let me read further. The Islamic Resistance Movement believes that the land of Palestine is an Islamic WAQF, consecrated for future Muslim generations until Judgment Day. It or any part of it should not be squandered. It or any part of it should not be given up. Neither a single Arab country, nor all Arab countries, neither any king or president, nor all kings and presidents, neither any organization nor all of them, be they Palestinian or Arab, possess the right to do that. Palestine Palestine, the whole geographical area, what they call Palestine, is an Islamic WAQF, land consecrated for Muslim generations unto Judgment Day. This is about a religious Islamic principle that's been laid down through the ages since the beginning of Islam, what Muhammad started, and they're unbending. There's no change in your mind at a later date to ease up on the principles and rules that they have laid down. These principles and how this was established goes from the beginning and the starting point of that principle all the way, in their eyes, to Judgment Day. In any land, like I said, any buildings, any possessions that infidel might have, or in this case, even a Muslim, serves the purposes for the betterment and advancement of the Islamic goal, and that is complete dominion. This being so, who can claim to have the right to represent Muslim generations till Judgment Day? Only Muslims, not anyone else. This is the law governing the land of Palestine in Islamic Sharia law. And the same goes for any land the Muslims have conquered by force. Because during the times of Islamic conquest, the Muslims consecrated these lands to Muslim generations till the Day of Judgment. Even if they don't control it, let me drill this into your head, into your brain. Even if they don't have control of it now, but they had a control of it sometime in the past, it's still considered Muslim. A consecrated area through Muslim principles and rules, and that will never change because they once had control over it. And that can't turn back. It can't turn back to what it believes in. To do that would change Islam across the board. And I don't care if you practice Sharia law or not as a Muslim, you still believe that. You still follow those principles and rules, with the understanding that this all leads up to a crescendo moment of time where the Judgment Day, even if it's not under Muslim control, will bring it at that time completely under Muslim control once and for all. That's the way they think. Sooner or later, prior to Judgment Day or after Judgment Day, they will have complete dominion. Based on some dreaming by Muhammad, some vendettas that he carried out. I don't know what desert plants that he was smoking at the time. They sure were created by the devil, homegrown, by the devil himself, to create the grand illusion that he was a prophet of God and made up the rules as he went to achieve his purposes. Let me read. I can get sidetracked right there and go off into a different direction. The Arab League Secretary General Azam Pasha said on May 1st, 1948, thus even before the Jewish state was born, because it was not born until May 14th, 1948, quote, if the Zionists dare establish a state in Palestine, that's what it was called, one of its names back then, the massacre which will ensue here will dwarf, listen to this folks, will dwarf anything which Genghis Khan and Hitler did. It didn't say or, and Hitler did. I don't know if you know anything about Genghis Khan and what he wiped out along the way. He makes Hitler look like an amateur. Here's the combination. Therefore, that's end the quote. But can you continue reading now? Therefore, the acceptance of jihad or holy war comes easily to Islam. From this inception, Islam has been been a warring, warring, and very bloody, subjugating religion. In other words, to bring under control everyone's mind to the belief of what Islam stands for and believes in, which has not blushed and the use of war and terror, but glorified it as the absolute will of Allah. This then is the main problem. As long as Islam remains intolerant, which they always will be, of really accepting, oh, they might lie, and they will lie to achieve their purposes. If I make it to the end of this article, you see that's happened before. That's how they started in the 600 ADs. Then this then is the main problem. As long as Islam remains intolerant of really accepting any other group of people on an equal basis, there can never be a real peace with an Islamic power. Only a submission. By the way, that's what Islam means. Only a submission awaits the whole world, including the secular, often non-religious West. This is why the Muslim children chant, especially during the Middle East wars, quote, "We shall fight on Saturday and then on Sunday," end quote. In other words, first the Jews and then the Christians. First the Jews and then the Christians. Make no mistake about this. When Israel be swallowed up by the sea of Jihad, soon to be armed by weapons of mass destruction acquired by Muslim Iran and Muslim Iraq and others. This is written 10 years ago. The Muslims will believe that Allah has brought them to this point and they can finally reoccupy their Muslim Palestine and drive the Jews, the infidels, as they would call them, into the sea, as they have said, and scream many times in the name of their Allah. Well, I got news for you. This is not a Christian that's writing this, and most Christians don't even understand this, because there's often some Christian science fiction theory about the last days. Israel will not be swallowed up. If it is, I can't find it in God's Word. Israel will not be swallowed up by a sea of jihad. Will they become under attack? No doubt about it. And there will be many different attacks before the end, depending how close the end is. And there's going to be one major attack. But they're going to be attacked. But they won't be swallowed up, folks. We only need to look at the genocide by Muslims of over 1 million Christians in southern Sudan, the massacres of Christians in Indonesia by Muslims and elsewhere, not to mention the genocide of Armenian Christians in the past by Muslim Turks, to know that this chant is no empty threat. We shall fight on Saturday and then on Sunday. We fight the Jews and then we fight the Christians. That's what it means, folks. You're not hearing this in the news media. You're not even reading this in history books, recent history books, from 1948 up, especially in this country, United States of America, which has ties to Israel, which we are insulting daily under the present administration in this land, our closest ally, a faithful ally, our brother, when you truly understand that we're Ephraim. And even though Britain has forgotten, they're Manasseh. But they will be reminded also. And the two sticks have to come together, the stick of Judah and the stick of Joseph, according to the book of Ezekiel. And they have come together. That's how 1948. And I probably will go back. I'm not sure yet, but I'll probably go back to the Two Horns, the British Empire, and show you the resistance that Britain had of Israel becoming a state, a sovereign state. Let's continue tonight on this, what I'm doing here this evening. But when Israel is no more, their hands will be free to turn again against the West. So basically, if they are able to accomplish, which they won't, that's where I differ from this writer. Mine is based on God's Word. They will turn against the West. Well, you know what? They already have turned against the West. And they'll keep turning against the West. But when Israel is no more, their hands will be freed to turn against the West as they did in the 6th and 7th centuries, when they were finally stopped in their Islamic invasions at the Tours and Poitiers in the middle of France, having conquered all areas of Europe from Istanbul to Vienna and from Morocco to the middle of France, including Spain. This time, after Israel has been dealt with in true Islamic fashion, they will try again. Well, let me tell you right now, they've already been trying. They already are trying. Their whole goal is to repopulate Europe, especially Western and Central Europe, even Eastern Europe, but they already almost have accomplished that. Look at Albania. It's a Muslim country. What was then Czechoslovakia? It's turning into a Muslim country. You have Bosnia now, you have Kosovo. They're turning into Muslim countries. They're, in their mind, reclaiming their WAQF, because it's already been consecrated in their minds, because they've been there before. They were pushed back. They were the 7th beast, and they were pushed back. But the 8th, but yet they're the 8th, because they've been revived. If you've been following along in this series, you will understand that. If you just picking it up now, go back. I strongly suggest that you go back, or else you'll be lost. This time, after Israel has been dealt with in true Islamic fashion, they will try again against the West, in this case Europe. Through their oil, wealth, and enormous spread of the religion through thousands of mosques and millions of Muslims all over the world, Islamic leaders believe that day has come to wipe out the humiliation of that defeat in Europe by the armies of Charles Martels, and now reconquer Europe all the West for Allah, thus adding all these territories, Europe, to become Dar el-Islam. Dar el-Islam, part of the house and possession of Islam. This, however, is not seen or understood by the vast majorities of the Western leaders. That's an understatement. Nor, in that sense, by most of the leaders of Israel. Therefore, the West, with all of its diplomacy and myriads of trips to help find a solution to the Middle East conflict, were unable to do so because of unwillingness to face up to the central reason for the conflict. This essay tries to put the finger on this overall problem without which no solution will be found to this Middle East conflict. Because of this very nature from the beginning, Mohammedans have believed that this is their holy duty, or Muslims believe that this is their holy duty, to subject the whole world, even be it by force of jihad, to the teaching of Islam. If we only had half the desire in the Christian world as the Muslims to accomplish its goals. Now, I'm not saying there's not desire in some organizations, but all they're putting out is a Tower of Babel of confusion. All these different religious opinions, most of them not verifiable in God's Word. They'll be held responsible for this babble of confusion. That's why I get so aggravated with my listeners when you don't participate. Don't you have the desire, knowing what we're up against? Up against a beast? In a sense, get this in your brain. Don't forget it. Remind yourself daily. Part of your existence is to fulfill the Great Commission. That Great Commission we know as getting to God's Word. Everybody will accept that out to a world that's starving and in need for it. Needing salvation through Jesus Christ. but put another concept on it. This is the only thing that's combating and coming against the spread of the beast and its goals that will affect humankind, both in thought and whether you believe it or not, eventually in obedience. And if you're not going to be obedient for the areas they conquer, there's a strong possibility death's going to follow. This is what we're combating. How many of you woke up this week? I'm willing to take bets that I probably could count on a handful if there's that many listening. How many of you woke up after you gave thanks to the Lord, you worship Him, you praise Him, you do whatever you do normally as your routine, announced to the devil, and now to you, devil, I come against what you're trying to accomplish in these last days, your greatest push, and that is to come against the beast that will influence and dictate what happens to at least a third of the population of the world, if Scripture is true, and I believe it is. You need to wake up. I do agree. The vast majority of Western leaders and Israel don't even have a clue what's really going down. What's your excuse? The word Islam, as already been noted, express this very connotation, to submit. Therefore, there is little restraint, if any, with a fanatic follower to this faith about using force, terrorism, war, and cunning to attain this goal. Actually, all of this is sanctified and rewarded by Allah. I'm going to quote from the Arab mind. Quote, the fundamentalism and fanaticism of the Islamic revolution has affected Arab thinking, and especially that of Shia Arabs, as well as that of those Palestinians who are members of supporters of the PLO. They have embraced terrorism and violence as normal expressions of political opinion, end of quote. Thus, if the Jews or Israelis finally see one of their members snap and kill Muslims in an aspiration of a fury, as Dr. Baruch Goldstein did in the mosque at Hebron, practically the whole Israel society blushes for 3 days, incriminating themselves for having allowed such an atrocious deeds, apologizing to the whole world. This is hardly any such blush or incrimination on the Muslim side. There is, hardly any such blush or incrimination on the Muslim side, only maybe a faint apology, mainly for political purposes towards the West, that they, the Muslims, are against all acts of violence. But none of the self-incrimination seen at the Israeli and Western side for similar atrocities. You saw that with the World Trade Center. Or you have some apologies when the World Trade Centers and the Pentagon and the plane that didn't get to any particular building but crashed into the ground because of some courageous people trying to overcome the terrorists who were on that plane. You didn't see much apologizing going around. You never saw anybody in the Muslim world, and I looked hard, coming against these terror acts. They just don't. The apologies are fake. The apologies, true, are for political reasons, and they're political massages. But their belief and what they know the Islamic principle is all about, they would not even dare to seem like they're coming against someone in a jihad movement. You just don't find it, folks. When Sharon was the prime minister, let's continue. He's not any longer. Now we have Netanyahu. I like Netanyahu. We need more Netanyahus. I wish we had a Netanyahu for president. I hope he stays by the stuff. And he doesn't fall for President Obama's or any other world political influence to bend on the blockade, the sea blockade that they have now. Because if they do, all Gaza will become is a terrorist porting facility to receive bombs, rockets, whatever is necessary to bring destruction to Israel, if possible. I hope he doesn't bend. I pray he stays true and keeps his strength, even if the world comes against him. Whether you realize it or not, folks, and most of you don't, because you're too prideful to believe the United States will allow such things to happen. Especially those of you who are United States citizens. You just don't want to believe your country would fail in this way. But it has. Israel is the only thing that's keeping back the first beast from rapidly taking over the world. And that was predicted. That was prophesied. Israel is the net that is keeping it in check somewhat, not the rest of the world. If Israel was not in the picture, you don't think the rest of the world would bow down and kiss? We know Britain did, and we know, and we have the history to prove it. The United States followed within several decades after Britain because its desires and need for oil, because we consume it at rapid rates. Ariel Sharon, now Prime Minister, not now, but 10 years ago, was not directly involved in the massacre of Muslim Arabs in Shatila and Sabra in Lebanon. Nevertheless, Israel took to the streets in massive self-incriminating demonstration, not against the perpetrators of this cruelty, but against their own leaders for not having foreseen it and thus allowing it to happen. There is no self-criticism even for acts and massacres much worse on the Muslim side. There, the worst kind of terrorists are praised, not condemned, as being true and courageous martyrs for Allah, who will be rewarded in heaven by beautiful damsels and wine. This, then, is the difference we are dealing with, and unless we are willing to confront it head-on, it will continue to dictate the gruesome realities of wars and violence still to come, and all in the name of Allah and Islam. Take, for instance, the gruesome lynching and murder by Muslim Arabs in Ramallah, seen on television sets worldwide. Was there any credible outcry of disgust by Arab or Muslim leaders at the sight of this heinous crime? No, for the built-in provision for violence of the non-Muslims or infidels is such a part of the philosophy and sadly practice of Islam that unless condemned in the strongest ways possible by those still courageous enough in the West, it will not go away or cause a true reversal of such practices in the Middle East. I guarantee you it's only going to increase. Justice and righteousness are indivisible. It counts for all. Listen to the rather courageous words of Zakaria Muhammad, a Palestinian intellectual. Quote, I cannot understand the attitude of the Palestinian intellectuals towards the murder of the 2 Israeli captive soldiers in Ramallah. When I see a Palestinian intellectual sinking his teeth into the flesh of Israeli intellectuals in his newspaper column without saying even one word of truth against the murderers committed on our side, I sink into depression. Justice is one and cannot be divided. You cannot use the part that serves you and cast off the other part, because in so doing you destroy the very essence of justice, which is supposed to be the intellectual's principal weapon. End of quote. So what can we do if this all is such an integral part of the tenets of the Muslim faith, if we want to reverse it and have so a chance to bring real peace to this troubled Middle East? If it is true that the root problem of the Middle East conflict, or the Arab-Israeli conflict, to be found in the tenets of Islam, then we have to address these tenets as the main reasons. Just as we in Europe would have had to address the tenets of Nazi ideology as being the main reasons and culprits for the terrible massacres and destruction all over Europe. We cannot say, as some indeed have done, that because people believe a certain ideology or even religion, therefore we have to accept and respect this. This is probably the greatest error of our time. All in the name of this so-called tolerance, the wicked or fanatics then triumph. Now bring it up right to the point because of which politicians so far failed to resolve this Israeli-Arab conflict, the burdensome stone or problem of Jerusalem claimed by both religious Islam and Judaism as their holy city and property. Islam hardly even recognizes any sanctity of this city or Temple Mount in relation to Judaism, whereas the Jews bend over backwards to make room for the sensitivities and wishes of the Muslims, by allowing them to conduct the religious affairs of Judaism's most holy city. Well, that's their first mistake, in my opinion. But I understand why. It's an abomination of desolation that had to be there, and it still needs to be there. But I understand why. But Jews are sensitive to the fact that their holy sites are there. But God forbid if one Israeli walks even near it, because they don't want to even recognize the temple once exists, not on that spot on the Dome of the Rock area, location, or the Al-Lusk, and we've pointed that out, but where the Dome of the Tablets are, which is to the right of the Dome of the Rock, about 100 yards or so, or 300 yards, I can't remember now, but it's a distance, far enough away from the Dome of the Rock. There's no tolerance. How would we go about solving this seemingly insolvable problem of Jerusalem? It is like the two mothers both claiming before King Solomon to be the true owners. I'm almost done, folks, so bear with me. The two owners of this disputed baby. But one was lying. One of them was usurping her rights without any basis, for she had stolen the baby, replacing it with her own dead baby. And that is exactly the story of Islam. They are great usurpers, building their mosques, preferably on sites formerly belonging to other faiths, and then claiming it henceforth as belonging exclusively to themselves. That's what's happened on that Temple Mount. This needs to be addressed as a lie and falsification of history. If we ever want to come to a righteous, true, and just solution, which we won't, there might be a partial, but it'll be broken. One of the mothers was lying before the wise Solomon. It was not her baby. Until this very day, we see this endeavor to rewrite and alter history is perpetuated. M.K. Abdul Malik Dahamshi of the Democratic Arab Party stated that the following on March 24th, 1997, quote, that the Western Wall is holy to the Muslims is not new. We think, and also knowledgeable Israel sources think, in which they don't quote any, by the way, that the Western Wall is not associated with the remains of the Jewish temple. When the temple was destroyed, not a single stone remained in place. Aha! But they do acknowledge that the temple was there because it wouldn't be destroyed if it was not there. So what's their claim on it? Don't the Jews have a claim first? The Western Wall is a part of the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex. When Muhammad took his horse to Jerusalem, and it was a special horse, he tied it to the Western Wall before he ascended into heaven. Also, Jewish sources say that there is nothing connected to the Jews to the Western Wall. That's all hearsay, folks. I've read this. There's no sources backing up any of this statement. It's just more blah, 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 blah. Jerusalem is not, as is often held, I'm not reading from that source anymore, Jerusalem is not, as is often held, the city of the three great faiths. At the most, it is a city of origins of two faiths, Judaism and Christianity. Islam did not originate in Jerusalem. It originated in Mecca and Medina on the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. Not once is Jerusalem mentioned in the Quran. Not once. Whereas the Bible mentions Jerusalem over 600 times. Therefore, Jerusalem is not the same sense important to Islam as it is holy to Judaism and Christianity. The reason that Islam built the stunning golden dome of the rock on the Jewish Temple Mount was to express its reputation of Jewish or Christian claims of sanctity, thus usurping the right to call Jerusalem El-Quds, and that's what the Muslims call it, El-Quds, not Jerusalem, the holy city for Islam, because Islam conquered it. The interpretation of the Muslim legend that says that Muhammad on his nocturnal journey through Sinai, Bethlehem, and Hebron arrived at the place of the Father Mosque, which there was as yet no mosque on the Temple Mount. The time of that dream was at a later date claimed by Muslims to have been the mosque on the Temple Mount. Therefore, today Al-Usk Mount carries the name the Father Mosque. So basically, that's a lie. Muhammad never traveled there to go to a mosque, to be ascended in the presence of that mosque, because there was no mosque there to start with. I mean, history proves that, folks. Archaeology has proven that. Here is how Ilahu Tal describes this Muslim falsification of history. Quote, featured prominently in today's headlines, Al-Usk at the time of Muhammad was, according to some Orientalists, an obscured mosque located in Arabia, distant from the Kaaba, the most venerated shrine in Mecca. Oh, I have a lot to say about the Kaaba in the future and how it ties in the book of Revelation, by the way, folks. But we'll get there. It was a stopover in the prophet's nocturnal flight to heaven, as recounted in the Quran. Glory be to him, quote now from the Quran, glory be to him who transported his servant by night to heaven from the sacred mosque to the Father One, end of quote. The problem is there was no mosque there. Al-Usk in Arabic means the Father, the extreme one. Jerusalem, of course, is not mentioned at all, because at the time it was still under Byzantine rule. The prophet, who died in CE 632, 6 years before the city surrendered to the Muslims, could never have set foot in Jerusalem. The Arabic name of Jerusalem, Al-Quds, the Holy One, is derived from Beth el-Muqaddas. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. The Hebrew name for the Temple Mount. The sanctity of Jerusalem was not enshrined in Islam at its inception, but was introduced into it after the death of Muhammad. End of quote. Now, if it is true, as is here maintained, that Islam's so-called holy rights to ownership of the Temple Mount and the old city of Jerusalem, El-Quds, are mainly usurped rights, having replaced and driven out after the Islamic conquest the claims and sensitivities of other religions, then they have not a just claim to this city in the way the Jews may have. Why? Because they made it up. They falsified history, and they backdated history to make this claim. And it's amazing how it stuck, for the most parts, in most people's minds. Read some of the history. Unless you dig for it, you won't find the truth, folks. Because what the Islamic empire, this beast, has accomplished is to falsify truth, to rewrite history. I mean, you see that today happening, 100 years ago or so, how progressives started to rewrite history, founding fathers' history, so they could pursue an agenda that would be different and take it from the path of the founding fathers established, and hopefully that would be carried out from their time into the future, so we can be equal in all our rights, obtain everything possible we can obtain without government intrusion, because we would have a constitution that would govern even government. But progressives had to change that, so they start rewriting history. And most of the history that teachers in grammar school, high school, or college are teaching today has been falsified, period. But you don't know that because you're not taught that. You're not instructed how that happened because they're trying to do a massive cover-up the last 50 or 60 years especially. How this all came about, how it all went down. It's nothing new in any particular country or ever in any government empirical system. I just gave you two examples, United States, and I just read to you one. Read the histories of other countries. It's happened over and over and over again. Now, if it is true, as it is here maintained, that Islam's so-called holy rights to ownership of the Temple Mount and the holy city of Jerusalem, Al-Quds, are mainly usurped rights, having replaced and driven out after the Islamic conquest the claims and sensitivities of other religions, then they have not a just claim to the city in the way the Jews may have. That's a fact. This is how I once expressed it in an article. It is unbelievable how quickly the criticism have come, both from inside as well as outside of Israel, against Sharon, as if he is the one responsible for the wanton destruction and violence that has erupted over all the land of Israel, just because he has an opposition leader wanted to visit the most holy place of Judaism on one of the high holy days of the Jews. How would British people react if their Buckingham Palace or the St. Paul's Cathedral had been taken over by invading Muslims who, by building 4 mosques around these places, as the Muslims have done on Israel's most holy important place, would henceforth claim Buckingham Palace as their sole property, being unwilling to even allow the British to visit their own historical royal residential site, or bar them from even praying at St. Paul's Cathedral. It wouldn't happen. But a blind world, especially a Western world, are letting it happen. And how are they letting it happen? Because they're coming against Israel more and more, forming opinions. Let me make it simple to you. Oh, Israel's too tough on the Palestinians and the Arab world. Only if they would bend in some of their views. I'm sure the Palestinians are willing to make peace. Are you nuts, folks? Have you lost your mind? Have you heard nothing tonight or throughout this series? There's no moderate Muslims. Peace is not part of the process. It's part of the political tool that they'll use, but they'll look for the moment they can break it as quickly as they can once they see they've achieved their purposes and they can't be moved. Or in this case, there's no way of losing the dominion they were able to claim because a world didn't recognize what they were all about. And now it would be too difficult or create too many additional problems to remove them from that position of power that the world placed them in. That's what happened. That's what's happened since the second horn healed the deadly wound on the 8th beast. And yes, it does exist now. And it's called the Islamic power. On the 8th beast, as it's been gaining strength and territory, and it's not done. What would Britain do if they build 4 mosques? Good point. around St. Paul's Cathedral or Buckingham Palace? What the United States of America would do? If they build it around the Capitol or the White House. And then they were told they have to go a certain direction, or they couldn't go in that direction at all, or be even near or close in approximation to these mosques. What do you think we would do? We'd probably tell them to, well, I won't tell you what I think we would tell them, but you know what I'm trying to say tonight, folks. You know the point that's being made here. We wouldn't tolerate it. But yet we're asking Israel to tolerate it, knowing the evidence and the historical evidence, whether secular or biblical, whether biblical archaeology or secular archaeology, it is proven that Israel was their way, Jews were their way before, much before Islam even came into existence. It's already had several temples destroyed before Islam came into existence. There's enough Roman empirical history to prove that point. But yet we ask Israel to do it. Shame on us, and shame on anyone else. Therefore, how would the nations of the world react if the people of Israel would have invaded and conquered Saudi Arabia, had built their most beautiful synagogue over the Kaaba stone, claiming henceforth sole and exclusive ownership over Mecca and the Muslims' most sacred shrine, demanding before the entire world what from henceforth is only a Jewish sacred place? The entire world would rebel. This is exactly what the Muslims have done. Should this be rewarded as has been tried in Camp David and other venues of negotiations by pressurizing the Jewish people to give up their unique, historic, and divine right to Jerusalem and the biblical land for Israel for peace sake, a peace which, according to the Prophet Muhammad's example, can be broken at will as soon as it would suit the Muslim powers? After signing the DOP agreement in Oslo, Norway, with Israel leaders, Arafat said to exclusive Muslim audience in a mosque in Johannesburg, South Africa, that he viewed this agreement he made as this despicable truce. That's how he viewed it. That's how the Muslim world view it. Not just the PLO, by the way, a despicable truce, which he said he would be able to break. Listen, folks. You see the same things repeated in history, in Islamic history, which he said he would be able to break as soon as it suited him, just as the Prophet Muhammad broke his truce with the Kurdish tribe in Saudi Arabia centuries ago. Do your history. Muhammad broke more than one truce, by the way, as soon as he got what he wanted. They're accustomed to it. They're not a people of their word. So if this is true, and it is, what kind of truce or peace is Israel, the West, expected to make with those who, even after signing of such a peace agreement, can break it at will and then obliterate their opponent, all in the name and for the sake of Islam and Allah? They're not going to hold to their word. They don't see that they have to. They see themselves as a rising, potentially, with the goal to take over the whole world, to dominate it, to everyone bow down to Islamic principles and beliefs established by Muhammad and others since 632 AD. Period, folks. That's not going to change. Oh, you'll see some political massages here and there that places hope in peace. And you might even have a temporary peace. But it'll be broken. It'll be broken as soon as the Arab world gets what they want. Are you against all Arabs? No. There's plenty of Arab Christians. And I preach to Arab Muslims all the time. I've read you messages. Just because They're Muslims. Doesn't mean that they still don't have the same opportunity as anyone else to be rescued by Jesus Christ. They need to be rescued from this beast that was healed. And the healing took place because of the British Empire desire, also by the way, for a world dominance that would come in a financial sense because of the precious commodity of oil, which a world needs, which the entire world needs. And don't get off on this, well, we're going to be changing our ways in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, if we're even around. And we'll have different energy sources. All these different energy sources come and go, folks. And most of our political schemes that only make others more powerful and richer than they are already. Do I have any problem with somebody becoming rich? No. That's not the point. The point is, how much control will they be able to obtain? And whether you realize it or not, they'll hand over continuously, all the way to the time of the end, the necessary tool, which is currency, because of the commodity that they received, in this case, the oil, that has revived them, that have made these Middle Eastern countries the first beast countries. That's a new way of saying it. The first beast countries to become powerful once again, to become fearless, where even the UN sanctions they scoff, mock, and laugh at, because they don't think it's a threat that will stick. And they know behind the scenes they have what the rest of the world wants and needs. And they know when they issue it out to a consuming world on a daily basis, that a flowing commodity of oil would just make them richer, stronger, more powerful, and eventually, even some countries, I predict, will have to bow down them because they need a rescue plan because their particular country is falling apart. Falling apart financially. And they no longer can sustain their habits, their expenditures, so they'll be willing to, I told you Greece earlier, it won't be a surprise to me, eventually the Arab world will have some say in it because it's part of the Alexander the Great Empire's territory. And basically, Greece, or any country like Greece, will sell itself to the Arab world because they need to be rescued in their eyes, which they don't even understand. Now they're forever in bondage. Because I've been driving that point home. I started out with, earlier in the article, if you remember, when I was reading to you through the article, Dar el-Islam, territories already occupied by Islam, that's consecrated for Islam, and Dar el-Arb, territories either once in the past were occupied and consecrated by Islam and still considered, in Islam's eyes, Islamic, even though they have different governments, or they will become Dar el-Islam, and therefore never will be able to retreat into a peaceful state, because once Islam, I got news for France, I got news for Spain, I got news for most of Eastern Europe. You'll never have peace. And their plans are already formulating and taking effect. Their population is growing. And sooner or later, if Jesus tarries, those countries will be oversaturated was Islamic believing followers that won't blink an eye to bend to the first beast Islamic empire wishes and do whatever it takes to accomplish it. Period. Britain still has a chance. That's why Charles the Martel, the Hammer, battle of Tours was so important. It stopped the progression, the desires of the seventh beast taking over of the British Isles. You see a population grow in Islamic population in Britain, but it's not too late for them. And I don't believe it's ever going to be taken over by the Islamic power of the eighth beast. I base that because of 732 and because of other references in God's Word, both Old and New Testament, which I haven't gotten to yet. But there's no such thing as peace. There never will be a true peace between Islamic world and the rest of the world. Period. And take it a step up from that level of where most of the people are in the world. Now increase it 100-fold by focusing on just two other countries, United States and Britain, and some other parts of the Western world. Don't think for 1 minute the ultimate goal of the eighth beast is to overcome and dominate those countries. Because they know once they dominate those countries, the rest of the world will fall. And fall rapidly. That's their master plan. And I'll read to you maybe next time their master plan outline to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. It's not about territories, folks, as far as Israel's concerned. It's about the destruction of Israel, period. They will not succeed. They will not win. Christ will not allow that. He will come back soon enough to make sure of that. Oh, there's going to be plenty of problems. There's going to be battles, wars, and an ultimate war that will take place. But Israel is not on the losing side. Period. And I don't know why the rest of the world cannot see that. I do know why, because Satan has blinded them. But it's a shame that they don't know what the options are. As far as the Christian world, they need to wake up. They need to escape from the bonds they're under on this Christian science fiction last days nonsense. And start looking at God's Word as it always has. History has always unfolded itself along the way. Why at the last supposedly 7 years some things that the world has never seen before that we cannot even describe or imagine are going to take place. The way it's described by these prophetic teachers. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense why God would bring that much confusion when He's still trying to rescue people all the way to the last trump. Wake up. Realize what you're a part of. Realize what we're laying down. And I still believe others will pick it up along the way and preach it better than I can. And I hope they do. And if they do, and I predict sooner or later, you'll start hearing about it. Guess what? Maybe we can say, we were a part of that. We were a part of that. And now it's going to reach more ears and more listeners so they can get ready because His return is coming soon. And we can know what the signs are and how close it is. I guarantee you that will happen. How many will still be around to see it happen? I mean, around participating in this ministry is still yet to be determined. You need to start getting serious about what you've been called to participate in. It's not happening that many other places. There's not that many people, I don't know if there's any, that are dedicating this much time to it. As you see, week in and week out, it's taken me time to go through this. It's probably going to wind up to be like another spiritual warfare series, which is already up to 110, 12, whatever it is, messages. And we're still not done. And that was only 6 verses. They haven't spent the time on this subject and dealt with it in the way I'm dealing with it, because all they have is Christian science fiction. You can't get, I guess, more imaginative than they already have. They already seem loony anyway. They hurt Christianity, not help it. Think about it. If you're not Christian and you pick up some Christian science fiction doctrines that are out there right now and start reading it, you would think, whoa! Don't, some of you, what is it, Christian Science or Scientology? You read their stuff, you go, whoa! What was this guy taking? What trip was he on? What do you think people that are not Christians, when they pick up some prophetic book that's been written about what to expect at the end, might think of us? Now, I don't really care what they think of Christians in general, because true Christians are supposed to be persecuted for what they believe in. That's not my point. The point is, if we're going to be persecuted, might as well be persecuted for something that's true and accurate. And it's the closest thing we can find in God's words that can be verifiable, not the other way around. I don't want to be persecuted for a lie. Do you? We talk about how the Muslims and others throughout history in different countries has falsified history, has changed history to prove their points, so they can meet their agenda and how they want to carry it out. Well, Christians have done the same thing with the Last Day series. It's time to wake up, folks. It's time to realize you've been called to this hour, not only to serve Lord in your personal life in the way you do it. You've been called to come against the last beast of time. How many of you woke up this morning realizing that? It's time to wake up. It's time to realize the enemy's all around us. And it's time to get serious in getting this out. Now, I want to hear from you. Play the song. If you want to continue in the subject matter of this Last Day series.